All right. Okay. So we're going to take a few minutes, have one person from each room introduce the other members of your group, and then share the two things that that you found to be somewhat interesting or somewhat different. So let's start with room one. Who's our facilitator from room one? Okay.
Hi, I'm Julia.
When you introduce your people, if you would put up some sort of reaction so we can find your square, that would be great. And if you want to share your video, that would be even more appreciated. Okay.
Hi, I'm Julia. We had Leah Dawson. Is she?
There she is.
Robin. Robin with.
There we go.
Thank you. And then Lewis, who has the cap and shaw thing in the bottom. Well, in my bottom. Our two things were we heard the Queen of England died, and we're all human.
Okay, well that helps. That's a good baseline. Okay. All right. Let's hear from room two. Who's our facilitator here?
I guess I will be. We didn't quite get to that, but so we have. I'm Mike. We have Taylor here somewhere.
There she is.
Daniel Solomon. Naveen Esperanto. There's Naveen. I didn't see him. Oh, there we go. Okay, and then Marisol, who's driving and trying not to crash while she's in class.
Yes, that's all.
And then we also had Amy, who's visiting from the Monday class. She's not actually in our class, but we accepted her.
Thank you.
And then we something interesting we all had in common is that we're all teaching currently.
Okay. Oh, good.
Yeah. We didn't get to the other part.
Okay. You want to pick one at random?
Well, we all love music.
Okay. Good deal. That's a good thing for a music teacher to say. All right. Thank you, Michael. Let's go to room three.
I think I was room three,
Okay.
my group. So in my group was Michelle, Tiana, Karen, Kat, and I. And
I don't think we saw them yet. Could you guys react when she called your name?
all right, so there's Michelle,
Oh, there she is.
and then Tiana,
There she is.
Karen,
All right.
Kat, and myself.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. And then two things that we agreed on that were unusual were we've all been to a foreign country and we don't have any allergies.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much. Okay. Now we're going to go to room four.
Hi, I'm in room 4.
Okay.
My name is Karen, and my group members are Laura Madrid. I don't know if she's here. There she is.
There she is.
Michael Colucci and Giselle Romero.
Okay.
And the two things we found most unlikely that we have in common are that we all have Costco memberships.
Okay.
And we are all not married, single, some of us engaged, but not married.
Okay, that counts.
Yes.
Thank you. And last but not least, room 5.
All right, so that's going to be me. I'm Tony, and my group members were Veronica. Oh, there she is. And then Elizabeth and Kevin. All right, so the three things that we had in common were that we like horror movies, we like going outdoors, and we like playing video games.
Great. Thank you very much, guys. Okay, so let's talk about the activity first. The reason why I do this, and I usually do this on the first night, but some of you didn't have a reader, so I waited. I put my classes into mutually interdependent learning teams that I refer to as pods. And you're going to find out more about that as we go through. But I put my kids in learning teams from the very beginning. And the first thing I want them to do is have a chance to talk to each other and find out things that they have in common. And once you take away the body parts, then they start sharing information. So it's basically a trust type of activity. And then what they do is they form a consensus as to which two are the most unique or unusual, and they share that with the group as they introduce everybody to the class. So I'm very much a believer in having kids be highly participatory in every aspect of the class. So this is one activity that I used to launch my classes and get them ready for the way that we run things in the room. So this activity here is one thing that I use at the very start of the semester to get them dug in. And I call it packing the room. And they'll stay in these learning teams for as long as maybe 10 weeks, or occasionally it could be the whole semester. And you're going to find out more about that as we go through. Okay. I also have this posted on Canvas if anybody is interested. And the other thing I do is I have them provide any contact information they're comfortable with, so that in case there's a question that they might have, whether it's about classwork or an assignment or something else, then they have basically a network that they can contact, because I may not be the only one, or I might not be that easy to get a hold of. Okay? So same with you. If there's a question about an assignment, or you need to catch up on something, you have 4 or so other people that you can contact either by phone or email to touch base with them. Okay, if you would open up your reader then to this page, and if you don't have your reader, just use a sheet of paper. You can transfer later. And you'll find this
What
right
number
after,
page was it?
yeah, it's right after the inside cover on Reader Part 1. Actually, it's page 5 in Reader Part 1. Now, what I'd like you to do in the box is just whatever comes to mind. What would be your personal definition of literacy? And obviously, you can't write a thesis, so just a short description of how you would define literacy when somebody asks you that question.
Are we supposed to write the words personal definition of literacy in? Because I don't have them.
You don't have to, but if you need to keep a record, you might want to. One more thing, where it says title in the upper part here, you can write it Reader Part 1. Okay, I think everybody's good to go. I can't see most of you, so I'm just going to take a guess. So as we look at this broad stroke here, we know that when kids start out, they're learning how to read in grades K through 3. Theoretically, they can handle reading by the time they get to grade 4, which we know oftentimes is not the case. And then when we get to middle school, we have some different kinds of challenges in terms of the amount of physical growth that kids are going through and all that challenges them. But The question that I have around middle school, and I think this is important, is when does the schema or the thinking around going into advanced or higher education begin? We like to think it begins in middle school, but oftentimes we know that middle school students can't see beyond the next day. So, how do we manifest this idea that there's something above and beyond? And what happens to kids when they get into middle school? Because we see a bifurcation in terms of kids' achievement and motivation. Elementary school is okay, fairly flatlined in terms of differences, although in different subgroups, we see that there's more of a gap than that among other groups. But in middle school, we begin to see, as the late Chick Hearn would say, the mustard falls off the hot dog right around middle school. So how can we prevent that learning loss at that time? And then what happens in high school, where we see a broader split between kids who are achieving and kids who are not. Now, there's a quote from Neil Postman from Teachers College Columbia, who wrote in one of his books, "Kids enter school as question marks and leave as periods." So what does that say to you? Any thoughts on that? Anybody care to offer a suggestion or an idea? Kids enter school as question marks and leave as periods. A lot of different ways to interpret this. Okay, Michael?
I would say they enter school really not knowing what the future is and what really much of anything. So they're asking a lot of questions and they're basically living a lot of questions. Whereas when they finish school, they're ready to make a statement.
Okay, thank you. Kevin?
The way I see it is like they come in not knowing much information about the world, specifically elementary. And then when they get to high school, where they're like, oh, okay, time to be an adult, time to look at career paths, what's best for me, what do I like? And they're starting to kind of come together more and more. They're taking everything they learned and they're applying it towards the real world.
Okay, great, thank you. And I think it's Elizabeth.
I took it a little less optimistic than that, and
Okay.
I saw it more as like they come into school like so curious and so like willing to question things, and then I feel like depending on their experience at school, they could leave just kind of like beaten down into just like this is just how it's going to be. But obviously that depends on the kid.
Yeah, that's true. Nobody's wrong here. There's no wrong answer to this. Leah?
Yes, I was just thinking kind of on the line, but just that kids will enter into high school not really knowing who they are. They're kind of more lenient towards their friend group, and then by the end, they kind of become more of their individual selves and less just exactly what they in middle school they were all about the friends, and towards the end they just enter in the time where they become more their individual selves. That's what I was thinking.
Okay, all right, good. Let's see. Tiana, did you have a comment?
No, I just said they enter wanting to learn and leave feeling like they know everything they need to know. But then I made a joke saying that doesn't last very long.
Yeah, they do think they know everything, don't they, by the time they graduate high school? Okay, well, there's a lot of different ways to interpret this quote. What Neil Postman was talking about was that kids come in with a natural curiosity, but a lot of times as they go through the rigmarole of school, it kind of gets beaten down, and so they're ready to learn when they come in, but through all the machinations of secondary school, with all the things that go on and the challenges that confront them, they become a little bit less inclined. Now, that's not the rule. That's not a standard for everybody, but certainly it presents some challenges to us in terms of our teaching. And actually, the book that, the book that this is from is called The Death of Education. When he was talking about how so many kids become disenfranchised so easily in secondary school, and there's a lot of research that seems to back up the fact that there's a lot of loss during that time. So in English language arts, the rate of students not meeting expectations was considerably higher in earlier grades compared with later grades, indicating that younger students may be uniquely struggling with literacy skills. So about 60% of fourth graders were not meeting standards in English compared to about 40% of 11th graders. So there's something that goes on that does work for a lot of students when they catch up. And some of that might be relative to the instruction and the type of intervention that they've had. We know that the scores of Black, Latino, and economically disadvantaged students were significantly lower, with more than 60% not meeting English standards and about 80% not meeting math standards. And then what this seems to typify or represent is something that's commonly referred to as the achievement gap, where we see some groups outperforming others quite often. The other thing that is interesting is why kids read at all. Most of the students, compared to other countries, most of the students in the United States said that they only read if they have to. Now, that doesn't mean they're not doing different types of reading, whether it's their phones, the internet. But the question is, are they doing meaningful reading in those arenas? But the idea of recreational reading seems to be slipping away in terms of a lot of our students and even a lot of our adults. Pew Center's results of an annual survey of reading found that nearly 1 in 4 adults said they haven't read a book in any format, print, electronic, or audio, in the past 12 months. More than 30% of those earn less than $30,000 a year reported no book reading, compared to only 15% of those who made $75,000 annually who have not read a book in the last year. What do you think's going on here? Any thoughts? Elizabeth?
I feel like it's just kind of showing that those who are willing to like read, and I know that everyone's not always reading like a nonfiction book, but like if you take it upon yourself to read and like better yourself and like learn more on your own, then you're more likely to do better, I guess. Or maybe it's flipped, where the people who are not doing as well that's because that they like never really got into reading, and so that they didn't like take it upon themselves to learn more or like better themselves, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Julia?
I think that they're just not reading actual books, but they're like reading newspapers or scrolling through social media and reading that stuff as like their book area. Because that's what I do. I read mountains of paperwork a day, and so I don't really want to sit down and read a book for X amount of time. So I just scroll through my phone, read some articles, do that.
Okay, thank you. Leah?
Yeah, I think that a lot of times in school that we get so just overwhelmed and a lot of times bored with just prescriptive writing and just, academic reading, that it kind of leaves a bad taste in the student's mouth. And so they don't, after, they've read so much in school and they weren't really interested and it wasn't tailored to their taste, they weren't engaged, that they just kind of lose that opportunity and they don't build upon language because they just lost the opportunity or lost a lot of the that point where they would really be engaged in reading. So I think that a lot of times that has to do with when teachers teach things that are just not engaging to the students or do not go towards their interests, their cultural background, just do not have any of that in there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And I see Marisol is back. You made it.
Yes, I finally made it. Thank you again for letting me do that. I feel like one of the reasons too why people aren't into reading so much anymore is just because of all of the distractions that we have that make it so hard to focus. Because even speaking for myself, growing up, I was an avid reader. I loved reading for pleasure all the time. College came, I started reading a lot of my academic work instead. And then after that, I've found it really hard to fall back into it the way I was into it when I was younger. And part of that is that when I do try sitting down and reading for pleasure, I find myself getting easily distracted by my phone or just other things going on because just the world has changed.
Yeah, I agree. So this mainly just creates a challenge. And part of the issue, too, is that a lot of the reading that kids do is not self-selected, right? It's assigned. And so if they don't have an interest in the topic, or they're not eager to learn about the topic, then we have to somehow create that interest to get them into it. Okay? Michael?
Just from a slightly math perspective, I would have thought that number would have been higher. I didn't think that we were that literate. Like that, if you grabbed 4 people, 3 of them would be like, "Oh yeah, I read books all the time."
Well, then we have some good news, don't we? So, yeah, but these numbers can be fluid too. As you'll see a little bit later on, the pandemic has created a fairly significant amount of learning loss for a lot of our younger kids based upon the latest test data. So that's going to be another issue that will challenge you. But, I heard a statistic that said that 10% of the people buy 80% of the books. And so you might be, more inclined to think that that could be accurate too. So, it's hard to say, but this is just from the Pew Research Center. A lot of this depends on the samples that they've chosen and how they cross-referenced them. So there's a book that came out some years ago called When Kids Can't Read, What Teachers Can Do by a reading person called Kylene Beers. And in this book, in her prologue, she talks about how when she graduated with her degree in teaching from University of Texas, that she wanted to be an AP literature teacher. So she finally got an interview, and she went down to the personnel section, and when she walked into the room, there were 14 other teacher candidates there, all women, who all wanted to teach AP literature. When she was sitting there, 2 of the people from the office walked by, and one of them said to the other, "God, I wish somebody would want to teach middle school." Now, in her mind, she had imagined, as an AP literature teacher, walking down well-polished hallways of a school with a steaming cup of coffee in one hand and a stack of brilliantly written essays in the other, only to be stopped by students wanting to know if they could come by after school to continue their discussion of Romeo and Juliet or Moby Dick or some other classic. Well, then she says, but then I got my first teaching job, and all that changed. So when her name was called to go into the interview room, she got up, she felt a little bulge in her pocket, and remembered that as she ran out the door that morning, her father had slipped a little wad of paper into her pocket. So before she hit the door, she reached into her pocket and pulled it out, opened it up, and it said these 3 words: "Get a job." So when she walked into the room and they asked her, "What do you want to teach?" she said, "I want to teach middle school." And both of the interviewers asked her a question that shocked her a little bit, but they said, "Why would you want to do that?" Well, sooner or later, she found herself at a middle school teaching reading. But on the first day, she realized that the counselor had given her all the wrong kids because she wanted the literate ones, and the kids that she had, many of them couldn't read. So she went to the assistant principal, who was in charge of counseling, and said, "I think there's been a mistake. I think you've given me the wrong students. I want the literate ones, and you're giving me the kids that can't read." She said the assistant principal looked at her from over the edge of her half-rimmed glasses and said simply, "I'll make a note." But she didn't change one thing. Well, next day, or a couple days later, she came into class to the assistant principal because she'd been called down with a note. And the assistant principal said, "You have a parent conference tomorrow morning with the parents of George." George was a kid in her class who, although he tried, he really couldn't read that well. And she said, "The parents want to know why he can't read and what you're going to do to help him." So she looked at the assistant principal and she said, "Well, I don't know. He just can't read. I don't know what to do with that." And the assistant principal said, "Well, you have a night to figure it out." So here we pick up her first parent conference as a new teacher. The next morning, I walked into the school for what was to be my first parent-teacher conference, but a conference in which I had nothing to say. George's father, mother, and the assistant principal sat there waiting. George's father began, "We are here to discuss with you George's reading problems." I nodded. He continued, "What we want is for you, his teacher, to tell us what those problems are." I kept nodding. And then slowly, reluctantly, I began to speak. Well, George's problems, which are problems of reading, are therefore identified as reading problems. I paused. These problems, reading problems to be specific, are problems in, and suddenly I knew the answer, like it was delivered to me on a platter. I knew what to say. They are problems in comprehension. Surely that was the answer. Comprehension was a somewhat technical term, most often linked to discussions about reading, and the answer seemed to work. George's father began to nod his head. George's mother nodded her head. The assistant principal nodded her head, and I almost certainly nodded mine. And suddenly, George's father announced, "Well, we know that." Our heads stopped nodding. "What does that mean?" he asked, none too happy. I was undaunted. I could answer the question, but surely he just needed a synonym for comprehension. That would mean, I responded, that George has a problem with understanding. I stopped, but not a single head nodded. Where does she go from here? She has nowhere to go. She's stuck. The question is not answerable in this setting. So the question that I have for you is, what would you say to George's father? Now, you don't need to answer this question right now, but my goal is by the end of this course, you will be able to come up with a specific and thorough answer to George's father's questions, because you're going to have George's in your classes from here on out. Again, sometimes we tend to look for a solution without understanding the problem, right? So oftentimes we get into it too deeply before we really take a step back and try to figure out what's going on. As the caption says, it turns out that it was a loose marble in your glove box, but they've already torn the car apart. So while there are many answers to the question from George's father, there are two critical ones here. First, there's no one answer to understand why an adolescent struggles in reading. For there to be only one answer, there have to be only one cause, and for there to be one cause, our students have to be alike, learn alike, and have the same experiences. Second, well, there's no single answer. There are answers. My chant of why these kids can't read was not the wrong chant. They couldn't read. But once I was willing to add to the question, they can't read, so what am I going to do about it? Then the answers begin to emerge. And these are the answers we're looking for. Again, we know that for early reading, modeling reading can be contagious, even if you have the beast in the yard. So reading, as defined according to the National Council of Teachers of English, is a complex, purposeful, social, and cognitive process in which readers simultaneously use their knowledge of the spoken and written language, the knowledge of the topic of the text, and the knowledge of their culture to construct meaning. So it's a constructive generative process, which means that we know that it isn't a simple process, it's complex, that there has to be a recognized purpose behind it, that literacy is social, and it's a cognitive process that allows students to use not only their knowledge of a topic, but the spoken and written language and their command of those. As Einstein said, any fool can know, the point is to understand. So it's not necessarily a technical skill, although there are technical aspects to it, we acquired once and for all in the primary grades, but rather a developmental process. We are all on a continuum of learning to read. For us, because we have relative proficiency in reading, the variable will be the topic that we're reading. So if we know a lot about a topic that we're reading, then we become fairly fluent in it. If we're reading a topic that we don't have a lot of knowledge on, say thermodynamics or nuclear fission, then we might be challenged the way a lot of kids are in terms of their reading skills but the competence continues to grow through engagement with various types of text and wide reading for various purposes over a lifetime. So if we were continuously reading information on nuclear fission or thermodynamics, then we would get to a point where we would master and become fluent in those readings. So we know that highly effective content area teachers plan lessons that are engaging. We have to hook the kids into the process. Oftentimes it won't be the content, but it'll be the processes we use in the instruction. These teachers recognize that engaging the disengaged is not an easy task. And we know that many of our kids in secondary level tend to be disengaged, and I'm going to include distracted in that sentence as well. So a top instructional priority for us is to involve students actively in learning the important ideas and concepts of the content that they are studying. And then how do we assess that to know that they've understood it? But the effective teacher also knows that an intellectually challenged instructional environment engages students not only in the acquisition of content, but also in the thinking process by which they learn the content. A lot of our students who have been delayed in reading have compiled a load of what we call busy work in their classes, and this is not going to really motivate anybody in terms of enhancing their literacy or their language acquisition. So the question we have to ask is, now what? So what I'd like you to do is unmute, and on the count of 3, I want you to wake your neighbors and give me a big shout. Now what? Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Okay. So this is an inventory of things that we think about in terms of engaging students, in terms of successful, and program is probably not a word I would choose, but let's say an approach. So we know that formative assessments in terms of assessing what kids know about a topic can help us in terms of planning our instruction. We know that introducing explicit instruction in literacy-related skills and processes will help students access the information. We have to understand that a lot of our students are not reading at grade level, and so we have to honor the fact that they may have some lag in terms of their literacy development, particularly when it comes to academic language and content. We also know that when we engage kids in higher order thinking to promote engagement rather than just click the one that has the right answer with no real engagement, that will turn kids off. We know that each discipline has its own specific structure and function of language, so that when we teach the language of our content, then it allows kids to have an inside view and enhance their approach. And then systematic lessons organized by logical scope and sequence, so we don't just hit kids with an end product, but we build access and scaffolding along the way. Every content has its own unique vocabulary, which means that we need to introduce word analysis skills. Provide opportunities for students to build fluency through practice and repeated readings. We know that, particularly with academic text or informational text and even narrative text, it's not a one-time process. The kids need to go back and re-inspect and re-access in order to engage in comprehension. We need to pre-teach critical vocabulary so the kids don't rumble, stumble, bumble through the reading that they're going to do, but they can hit the text with some predetermined understanding, because the words that we select will carry cognitive load. Comprehension monitoring techniques, so the kids understand when they don't understand and have a fix-up strategy, be able to remedy that. We scaffold instruction to help students become more independent, which means that with our formative assessments, we know which inventory of strategies we can implement to get them to have access to the text. Whenever possible, choice, so the students can get a chance to select their own reading. And again, involve students in peer-mediated learning, meaning that kids get a chance to talk and discuss with each other about the content. So this is a pretty good inventory of some of the things that we can introduce into our instruction that allow us to begin to infuse literacy-based instruction into our teaching. So that, in a nutshell, is what we mean by content area literacy. Okay? Now, I'd like you to go back. Oh, by the way, the issue also carries into other subject areas. And particularly in math, we see a lot of kids struggling there. Eventually, the can't do the 56% will become the won't do. And this is true of any class as well, which leads us to a whole other constellation of issues that we're going to attempt to address as well. And again, parents may be of limited help too. As the kid says, don't be embarrassed to ask for help, Dad. Because a lot of times the learning that they're doing is long left the parents. Okay, I'd like you to just take a look at what we talked about in the last few minutes and see if you can add to your definition in this next square. What would be a way that you can extend the definition that you just wrote in the square first, and then go to this square next and see how you can embellish some of the things based upon the information we just attended to. Okay, I think everybody's just about done. Now, keep in mind that at the end of the semester, you'll be taking a screenshot of these keyword summarizers and you'll be emailing them to me as part of our last night's session. Okay? All right, now, the other thing I have to warn you about in my classes is I use a lot of brain breaks, and this is part of my nervous system reset model. Brain breaks are the absolute worst, most terrible jokes you have ever heard in your life. And so we're going to start tonight with a couple of brain breaks. So I just want to warn you ahead of time. But these are all really bad, okay? So grab onto your seats. Here we go. Ned, the other day someone broke into my garage and stole my limbo bar. Ned, that is terrible. Ned, yeah, how low can you go? Really bad, I know. Awful. Okay, now you got another one coming at you too, so here we go. Ned, I was trying to explain puns to my buddy who's a kleptomaniac. Did he understand? Ned, no, he takes everything literally. Now, unfortunately, those are the good ones because they get worse along the way. So bear with me as we go forward. So if you'll turn in your reader to page 11. You'll see something called domains of interaction. And this is really the theoretical underpinning of our course. And there are 4 areas here that we're going to be addressing as we unpack this formula. The first one has to do with fluency, which has to do with the ability to use speed and accuracy in your reading to make the text comprehensible. And this will also include vocabulary and other aspects of it. Now, these are not isolated features. They're all interacting, but we're disaggregating them for the purpose of presentation. The next one has to do with schema, or background knowledge, and assessing how much background knowledge kids have when we're teaching a new topic. Because the more background knowledge they have, the less dependent they'll be on the text, really. So we want to take opportunities to build background knowledge as much as possible. And we'll show some instructional strategies for that. And the cognitive strategies part of it are those moves that we make in our instruction that we build into our teaching that allow students to walk in the footsteps, so to speak, of proficient readers so that we can eventually gradually release the responsibility to them. And then one of the factors that also rears this ugly head is the issue of motivation. And this is really where we're going to start later on. We're going to begin the process by looking at student motivation, because there's a lot that we need to know in order to make the other parts work. Okay, so that'll be part of it. And the whole idea, I think, behind with literacy issues, there's so much in front of us that I say we're a bit like a mosquito in a nudist colony, because there's so much in front of us that we don't know where to start. So by using the domains of interaction, it gives us a segue into how to address some of these issues. So here's some essential things that we see in practices that educators should know, just to be aware of. First of all, we know that when students are grouped by reading level and poor readers are grouped together, there's really no advancement on the part of the less proficient readers. And we know that a lot of schools still do this, unfortunately, but it's not an adequate practice. We know that a lot of instructional time is spent on skills and strategy instruction. It offers a diminishing return for student learning because the emphasis is on skills and not on content. And the quick ride that we're going to do next week will refer to this as well. The student's background knowledge is essential to reading comprehension, so we need to think about ways in which we bring prior knowledge to the students when they have gaps and it's missing. We know that, again, for early readers, daily systematic phonics instruction is a game changer for a lot of kids. But what I found oftentimes is when kids get decoding instruction or phonics instruction, we need to get off of it as soon as possible because it just hangs too many kids up in terms of all the abstractions. Once they get word recognition and more automaticity, then we need to back away from the vehicle, and oftentimes we don't. A lot of my remedial reading students were given nothing but phonics instruction and very little reading instruction, and they continue to stay behind. And then we know that proven strategies for getting all kids, including English learners, students with IEPs, and struggling readers, working with grade level texts, to be employed to ensure equitable literacy work, meaning that we can no longer dumb down text, because when I was teaching reading, you could dumb down the text and use elementary reading for middle school. No, those days are gone with the standards. So you have to give kids the means to access grade level text. Now, what we see today is that relative to the NAP recent test, we know that a lot of the gains over the past 20 years have been erased because we experienced a 5-point drop in reading for fourth graders and a 7-point drop for math. Well, fourth graders are emerging middle schoolers. So if they haven't caught up by the time they get into sixth grade, then we're going to have a continuum of challenges that we're going to be facing as secondary teachers. So that when we ask the question, well, whose job is it to teach literacy? We oftentimes think of reading, but it's really literacy. I always celebrate that with the awarding of the It's Not My Job award. Because here's a guy who was slated to paint the lines on the road, but because this tree branch was in the way, he didn't bother to move the branch because, hey, it wasn't his job. Point is that if you're teaching any content area or any subject area, literacy is going to be foundational as a part of it. So you don't want to win this award. So, as you build your teaching practice, you go down two paths. The first path is your content, and the second path is your instruction. So there's some things that we can do and considerations to make in terms of our teaching and student learning. So here's one.
Not so long ago, many scientists believed that the brain did not change after childhood, that it was hardwired and fixed by the time we became adults. But recent advances in only the last decade now tell us that this is simply not true. The brain can and does change throughout our lives. It is adaptable, like plastic. Hence, neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity. How does neuroplasticity work? If you think of your brain as a dynamic, connected power grid, there are billions of pathways or roads lighting up every time you think, feel, or do something. Some of these Those roads are well travelled. These are our habits, our established ways of thinking, feeling, and doing. Every time we think in a certain way, practice a particular task, or feel a specific emotion, we strengthen this road. It becomes easier for our brains to travel this pathway. Say we think about something differently, learn a new task, or choose a different emotion. We start carving out a new road. If we keep travelling that road, our brains begin to use this pathway more, and this new way of thinking, feeling, or doing becomes second nature. The old pathway gets used less and weakens. This process of rewiring your brain by forming new connections and weakening old ones is neuroplasticity in action. The good news is that we all have the ability to learn and change by rewiring our brains. If you have ever changed a bad habit or thought about something differently, you have carved a new pathway in your brain and experienced neuroplasticity firsthand. With repeated and directed attention towards your desired change, you can rewire your brain.
So that's the good news. The kids are still in that area of brain development where they're building all these neuronic connections. And so we have an opportunity here, particularly with middle schoolers, but high school as well, to really begin to rewire these brains to create a different idea about what literacy-based instruction is and get them to model some of the behaviors that we as proficient readers use that we don't even realize. But the other part of it is, too, is that you've already had 12 years of student teaching prior to your graduating high school. So your brain already has, bless you, your brain has already formed a way of teaching. You have a schema or an idea in your mind of what teaching is based upon all of the modeling that happened during your 12 years of education, but also maybe even some of your college instruction. So implementing literacy strategies in a content class is a little like trying to ride a bike, but with a different mindset. And so we're going to look at a short video clip that evidences some issues around neuroplasticity. But for me, it's an analogy to what it means to begin infusing literacy instruction into your teaching.
Hey, it's me, Destin. Welcome back to Smarter Every Day. You've heard people say it's just like riding a bike, meaning it's really easy and you can't forget how to do it, right? But I did something. I did something that damaged my mind. It happened on the streets of Amsterdam, and I got really scared, honestly. I can't ride a bike like you can anymore. Before I show you the video of what happened, I need to tell you the backstory. Like many 6-year-olds with a MacGyver mullet, I learned how to ride a bike when I was really young. I had learned a life skill, and I was really proud of it. Everything changed, though, when my friend Barney called me 25 years later. Where I work, the welders are geniuses, and they like to play jokes on the engineers. He had a challenge for me. He had built a special bicycle, and he wanted me to try to ride it. He had only changed one thing. When you turn the handlebar to the left, the wheel goes to the right. When you turn it to the right, the wheel goes to the left. I thought this would be easy, so I hopped on the bike, ready to demonstrate how quickly I could conquer this.
And here he is, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Destin Sandlin. First attempt riding the bicycle. All right. So, fast yeah.
I couldn't do it. You can see that I'm laughing, but I'm actually really frustrated. In this moment, I had a really deep revelation. My thinking was in a rut. This bike revealed a very deep truth to me. I had the knowledge of how to operate the bike, but I did not have the understanding. Therefore, knowledge is not understanding. Look, I know what you're probably thinking. Destin's probably just an uncoordinated engineer and can't do it. But that's not the case at all. The algorithm that's associated with riding a bike in your brain is just that complicated. Think about it. Downwards force on the pedals, leaning your whole body, pulling and pushing the handlebars, gyroscopic precession in the wheels. Every single force is part of this algorithm. And if you change any one part, it affects the entire control system. I do not make definitive statements that often, but I'm telling you right now, you cannot ride this bicycle. You might think you can, but you can't. I know this because I'm often asked to speak at universities and conferences, and I take the bike with me. It's always the same. People think they're going to try some trick or they're just going to power through it. It doesn't work. Your brain cannot handle this. For instance, this guy, I offered him $200 just to ride this bike 10 feet across the stage. Everybody thought he could do it.
No, you didn't understand. You didn't understand. So, this one. All right, so no, you have to keep your feet on the ground. All right, let's see. Here we go. Like you guys start rolling at least. Hey, go. Feet on the bed. Go. Yeah.
Once you have a rigid way of thinking in your head, sometimes you cannot change that, even if you want to. Here's what I did. It was a personal challenge. I stayed out here in this driveway and I practiced about 5 minutes every day. My neighbors made fun of me. I had many wrecks, but after 8 months, this happened. One day I couldn't ride the bike, and the next day I could. It was like I could feel some kind of pathway in my brain that was now unlocked. It was really weird though. It's like there's this trail on my brain, but if I wasn't paying close enough attention to it, my brain would easily lose that neural path and jump back onto the old road it was more familiar with. Any small distractions at all, like a cell phone ringing in my pocket, would instantly throw my brain back to the old control algorithm and I would wreck. But at least I could ride it. My son is the closest person to me genetically, and he's been riding a normal bike for 3 years. That's over half his life. I wanted to know how long it would take him to learn how to ride a backwards bike, so I told him if he learned how to ride a backwards bike, he could go with me to Australia and meet a real astronaut.
Are you going to give up? Go ahead. This is how it starts. Look at this. This is such a big deal. Get up. You got it. Did you see his brain get it? So he, in how many weeks have we been doing this? 2 weeks? In 2 weeks, he did something that took me 8 months to do, which demonstrates that a child has more neuroplasticity, am I even saying that right, than an adult.
It's clear from this experiment that children have a much more plastic brain than adults. That's why the best time to learn a language is when you're a young child.
All right, today's bike log. I can ride smooth, I can ride fast. I'm thinking the experiment is over. Okay, now I'm in Amsterdam, a city that has more bicycles than people. The question is, can I ride a normal bike now? I mean, I've spent all this time unlearning how to ride a bike. If I go back and try to ride a normal one, will my brain mess up? So I've tweeted a Smarter Everyday meetup, if you will, and I'm going to see if somebody brings a bicycle, and I'm going to try to ride a normal bike.
It's backwards. It's backwards. This was one of the most frustrating moments of my life. I had ridden a normal bike since I was 6, but at this moment, I couldn't do it anymore. I had set out to prove that I could free my brain from a cognitive bias. But at this point, I'm pretty sure that all I've proved is that I can only redesignate that bias.
So what you're not seeing is just a group of people here looking at me, looking at the strange American that can't ride a bike because they think I'm dumb. But I'm actually 2 levels deep into this because I've learned and unlearned. All right.
After 20 minutes of making a fool out of myself, suddenly my brain clicked back into the old algorithm. I can't explain it, but it happened in a very specific moment.
Got it. My back. Oh, click. Okay, click. I got it. Okay, there it is. There's the moment. Okay, I can ride a bike.
I tried to explain this to the people around me, and they just didn't get it. They thought I was faking the previous 20 minutes, and I couldn't get anybody to believe me.
That looked like I faked it, didn't it? Yeah.
Just a
You
face.
think I'm faking? You don't know. That's so ridiculous. You think I'm lying, don't you? I'm not lying.
I felt like the only person on the planet who had ever unlearned how to ride a bike, and I couldn't articulate it to anyone because everybody just knew that you can't forget how to ride a bike. So I learned 3 things from this experiment. I learned that welders are often smarter than engineers. I learned that knowledge does not equal understanding. And I learned that truth is truth, no matter what I think about it. So be very careful how you interpret things, because you're looking at the world with a bias, whether you think you are or not. I'm Destin. I'm getting smarter every day. Have a good one.
By the way, this is the automotive version. So if anyone wants to give this a shot, feel free to let me know and I'll arrange a test drive for you. But the reason why I like to show this video is because it's an analogy to the fact that we all have an idea or a background around what teaching is. And this course is going to ask you to make some adjustments. to add to your repertoire of different ideas. So let's begin with learning a couple of strategies right away, okay? So if you grab hold of your reader, I'm going to share with you one or two strategies tonight that you can actually implement pretty quickly. They come from my reading program called Inside the Text, which was a secondary reading intervention that I wrote with two of my colleagues, and it's published by Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. And we're going to be sharing some of these ideas. So if you'll turn to page 19, let me get there. This is a quick write response form that I developed for my students when I was at Santa Monica College, and I've used it, and our teachers use it at all different grade levels. It's probably one of the best things that I ever created in terms of being easy to implement and very student friendly. But it changed the way my students engaged in reading in class. And the way that I would start my class was with a short, sustained reading period. We were reading a novel, but I also used it for articles and textbook chapters as well. And after we did the reading, I would hand out the Quick Write protocol. And this was a post-reading activity that helps build comprehension. And we're going to talk about it a little bit. And I'm going to give you a model that we're going to be using. It's a little bit different from our class than normal. Okay, so this is where you'd find it. I'm also going to have this posted in Canvas if you want a digital copy. Again, one of the goals of the protocol is to have students slow down, be more deliberate and attentive to their reading. So they're not just cramming everything into their head like this poor guy, but can systematically organize and recall information. So on page 19A, you'll see a short article here called Questions Linger About Tasers. I'd like you to take about 3 minutes and just read through this real quickly. Okay, I think everybody's had a chance to at least get most of the information here. So the question is, when you assign a student something to read, oftentimes what I've found in my observations is that kids are not really reading so much. They're waiting for you to tell them what's in the text. And I think Baca alluded to that too in his chapter. So we want to somehow put something between the text and the teacher to get kids to begin to work with and process the information. And what I found is when I did this with my junior college students right out of high school, it completely changed the way that they approached a reading task. Again, remember that it's a post-reading activity, so what we're engaging the kids in is something we call text reinspection. We're going to go back and re-examine the text. Okay? Now, one of the things that I like to do is to start with something called an anticipation guide. And I'm introducing it to you here. Actually, I'm going to hold off on that. Yeah, hold off on that for a second. I'm going to come back to that later. But this is what an anticipation guide looks like. So basically what I do is I start with 3 statements that are pertinent to the article but are not dependent upon having read the article. And then if you look at the statements, one says, police should use any force needed to stop suspects. Agree or disagree. 2, people who commit crime should not have rights. Agree or disagree. And 3, people don't care about how much force they use. Agree or disagree. Now, after they fill this out, one second here, let me check. After they fill this out, they write their reasons as to why they agreed or disagreed with it in the space provided. And then they draw a picture of what they predict the text is going to be about. We'll get more into this strategy. I just wanted to introduce you to it because this is how I would start off the activity. But then once we do the reading, we go to the quick write, and here's the article here. So let's take a look at the form. The first thing is we put in the title. Actually, we put their heading, so their name and the date. Then you'll find this again on page 19. They put in their name, the date, and the number of the quick write. Because what we did is we did these in series, and this was also a way for them to review the previous day's information. And as they accumulate these, then they can actually look at more over time to be able to review the information. So the first thing we do is we ask them to do a paraphrase. In your own words, 25 or less, what was this quick write selection about? And the guideline is really, 25 words is a guideline. I don't want kids necessarily to count words. What I found when I piloted this is that if I didn't put a limit on it, then they would just try to rewrite the whole chapter in this box, or the whole section that they read in this box. Because we read normally in about 5 to no more than 10-page sections before we stop and we do the quick write. So this would be an example of a paraphrase. The article discusses the use of the taser by police. Their use is being challenged by Amnesty International and human rights groups who say more research is needed. So they basically provide a generalized, a deconstructed, and then reconstructed gist of what it is that they read. Okay? And they're all going to be, different. Of course, some will be more thorough than others. And then the second section, we go back and we try to mine through the text for 5 words that are going to be integral to them remembering what they read. So they're going to pick the 5 words, and then they're going to cite a reason as to why they chose it. This is the important part. When they're determining why they chose it, they're operating at a different metacognitive level of comprehension, because now they're analyzing the importance of the word. And words carry concept loads, so they're trying to now make associations with the content load and how it fits into the article. So these are 5 words that I picked at random. I picked taser because it says that it shoots 50,000 volts of electricity to subdue suspects. It's probably important information. The barbs look like fish hooks. They can pierce the skin from 21 feet. And I noticed that in this short little sentence, I have 3 basic ideas: what they look like, how far they can travel, and how they function. And then Amnesty International is a human rights organization that wants the use of the taser stopped until more research is done. So this is where we get into the meat of the matter around the issue around the purpose for writing the article. I put in the word appeal because police like the taser because for them it's safer and also for the suspect. Although later in the article there may be some dispute about that. And then I put in research because some say that the long-term effects of the taser are not known. And this is another aspect of the article that I carried away. Then in the third part, we come up with 3 ideas that we ask them to either consider, to ponder. In other words, what did it make you think about? What did you appreciate? Or what did you dispute? And some of these can be in the form of a question. It's like, for example, what might happen to the crime rate if police stop using tasers? Why might some people feel that the use of the taser is justified without any real research? And the taser is sometimes used on people that are unarmed and they can die from it. And then this quick write, once it's filled out, becomes the springboard for my class discussion when we discuss the material that we just read that day. Because I can go back and I ask for a paraphrase. We share the words, which provides for me the teachable moment to teach vocabulary. And we get into extending the meaning beyond the text with this third part. Okay? So that's how the quick write works. These are what some of my students said relative to the beginning to use the quick writes. They're really useful and important for reading comprehension of the book's ideas and helps them memorize scenes. Let's keep doing the quick writes. I, as your English 85 student, actually enjoy them. I can keep up with the story. I think the quick write is helpful for me because it lets my brain know more about the book and not get bored. And part of that, I think, is because we're limiting the amount of text they read at one time. My limit is normally more than 5 to 10 pages, and that depends on the skill level of the kids. And my opinion on the quick write is that it's a great tool for me because I have a lot on my mind and I can look back and see where I left off. So this also serves as a daily review to have them review the reading that they did the previous time. And the quick writes are a good idea. They've helped me stay organized and I use them in other classes. Some kids ask me for blank copies so they can take them to their other classes to use. And the quick write to me is a method I'll use as I continue to read other books, making things in concepts more understandable, summarizes what you keep track and helps you keep track of the pages. I'm glad you showed me. I think the quick writes were helpful because it helps us go over things we've missed, helps with learning your vocabulary, makes you think and go deeper into the book, and keeps you motivated to keep reading. Quick writes are helpful. They keep up with your thoughts, and you can go back and look at them. If you need help remembering what happens, I would definitely keep up quick writes. They're perfect for books. They help you keep notes about what you read and give you a background about the book when it's finished. And I told the kids that they could use their quick writes, if they kept them, they could use their quick writes on the midterm or the final. And I remember one student came up to me and she said, you said we could use these, but I didn't even need it. And I said, well, that's the idea. So good for you. And then this quote, as much as I hate homework, quick writes are simple and workable. So sometimes the kids would do it for homework. If they missed a class, then they would make it up at home. Otherwise, they would do it oftentimes in class, time permitting. So this is one of my 521 students, science teacher. When we were first introduced to the quick writes, I was skeptical on how my students would react to the activity. After trying the activity one time, I was hooked. The activity is the perfect balance of reading and writing. And it is a way to bridge both the activities together in a way that is beneficial for all of my students. When they know they had to summarize what they read, they were more invested in the article. This was my observation too. The writing did help catapult my students into reading, even if the article may have been challenging for some of them. And then another student talked about these two. The brevity employed in the quick write might be far shorter than a paragraph or brief summation of a text on an index card, but it forces writers to reflect on what they read, pull out the most persistent details, so they're basically rebuilding, reconstructing persistent details, and then select their words appropriately. The words chosen don't have to be deeply reflective, but superficial enough to ensure the point comes across. And then this is a long quote from one of my 521 students about her own reaction to using the quick writes in our class. I used to begin my readings by highlighting whole sentences and annotate on the margins. When I began using the quick write approach, I gradually changed this intensive first read to a survey style read, looking for keywords that represented the main ideas of the article, which is what we want proficient readers to do. We call this text sampling, okay? Because then they're beginning to assess how much they know about a topic in terms of their prior knowledge. I immediately noticed a difference in my reading comprehension because I was engaging with the material by recognizing key ideas and explaining, sorry, that should be how, not how, why they were supported in my comprehension of the article. I used to struggle with paraphrasing, which was completely changed through the practice of the quick write, making me more confident in using my own words to express the main idea of the article in a succinct way. Finally, the approach motivated me to read the article through a critical lens by raising questions or reflecting on its implications for my future teaching. This allowed me to be more active in my reading instead of just assimilating the information. So the way that this is used is dependent upon my students, and I have to assess this, but in a certain period of time, maybe 10, 15 minutes, if my students read somewhere between 5 and 10 pages, we would stop the reading and I would hand out the quick write form. I did them double-sided so that we would use them over 2 days. Now, on page 13, if you turn back, there's an explanation of the quick write in an article called Building Comprehension for Secondary Struggling Readers with a Quick Write Protocol. And this will explain the process to you with a few samples, although in these samples they didn't explain why they chose the 5 words, okay? Now, an updated version of the article, which just came out last May, you'll find on page 18A, which is called The Different Quick Write Protocols to Promote Struggling Readers' Comprehension, Slowing Down to Speed Up. So these articles will explain how these are used in our classes. And once you try them out, and if you're inclined to do this with your own students, then we'll get an idea of how you're able to implement them. But I think if you want to do so, it's best to try out your own in here, so you get an idea of what it's like. There's also one in Spanish on page 19.8.1 for all of our Hispanohablantes who may need to do theirs in Spanish, or if you're a Spanish teacher, you may want to utilize it for that as well. Now, there is a different model for math, but I'm going to hold off on this because this will come in a little bit later. But in the math example, it's basically asking them what the problem is asking them to do. How can I solve the problem? What operations do I need to use? Perform them in the box. What are some possible answers? And how or why does this make sense? It's just a different way of processing some of the math problems, particularly word problems that they're asked to do. So we're going to be doing a quick write, and I'll be emailing it to you right after class tonight. It'll be due at our next class session. And I want you to notice that there's a slight difference in this form. It'll look like this, or it may be in a different format. But it'll be emailed to you, and it's also in Canvas, so you can type right onto it. Here's an example of what it might look like. Here's an example of a student who did the quick write this way. So they filled it out, and accordingly, they did the paraphrase here. They did the 5 words with explanations as to why they chose them. 2 ideas that have made them think about. The change is that I'm asking a different question here, and that is based upon the article, what is an implication for your teaching practice? Okay, so that's a slightly different version than the one we use with our students. The article will be basically 2 pages. It'll look like this. And then here's another example of a quick write that a student did. So you can get an idea of what they look like. Robin?
I'm just confused. Why is that typed? Because I thought we were supposed to write in pen and pencil in the physical. Is this the interactive reader?
Well, because you were in a digital classroom, so the way that you can get this to me is to type it out. Is that what you mean?
Well, I'm like, isn't it this book that is it, or is this an online thing, or is that because I'm looking at? I thought we were looking at PTV, the quick write responses in the physical book.
Yeah, but that's an example. I give you a hard copy of it so you have it for your use. But in here,
You can write it with pen.
yeah, oh yeah, you can write it all over the text wherever you want to. It's yours. But for the
But
quick
it doesn't
write,
have to be typed like this. is what I
well,
mean.
no, but for the quick write, the only way you could submit them is in your Google folder because we don't meet, right? So once you do the quick write, just like you do with the IQs, you remember the Google folder I showed you last week?
Yeah.
You're going to drop that into your Google folder right after class. So you have two folders. One is quick writes and one is IQ. If we were in a regular class, then you could fill them out in class. Although I have to include a caveat here. If you remember, I told you that this class is going to meet roughly about 2 hours. On the books, we are 2 hours and 45 minutes. So what I'm doing is I'm building time in away from being online to give you extra time to do it apart from sitting in session. Because for us to sit here and do this and have you fill out in here would essentially be a waste of your time just to sit on your computer and do this. So you have it ready to go by the time you get to class, and this will comprise the happy hour that we'll be doing. Okay? I've got a couple of people who have hand up, so I hope that answered your question. If not, then stick around after class for a minute. Tiana, and then Elizabeth.
Sorry, what article did you say we're gonna read before doing the quick write?
Can you say that one more time?
Which article did you say we're gonna do the quick
It's
write
going to
on?
be the article that I email you after class tonight.
Okay, and I have one more question. So you said that usually after class we have to take a picture of the work we do in the reader and send it to you, right?
No, the keyword summarizer is something you do the very last night of class in December.
Oh, okay. Thank
We're
you.
going to build it out through the course of the semester.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, but the quick writes, you will respond to the attachment that I send you in the email, type it out. Now, here's what I recommend. I recommend that you put a folder on your desk that's 521 folder. Keep it on your desktop. And in the folder, put two folders. One is the copy of your quick writes, and one is a copy of your IQs. And in the quick write folder, you're going to include the copy of the articles that I send you. All right, so you have everything as a record of what we've done in the class. All right, that way, all you have to do is pull it out of the folder and then send it to me, or drop it into your Google folder. So you have a storehouse of your information. Now, your Google folders and your quick writes will also be a storage place, but sometimes I'll send you handouts or something that you may want to hang on to. Okay, just for the record. All right, now, going back to this. So this is what the article that I'm going to send you will look like. Again, you'll get it tonight after class. And let's see, there's a hand up here. Michelle and Kalia.
Me first?
Yeah.
Okay, so you told us that we had like an IQ that was like and from last week.
Right.
And I did do my IQ and I did like the first IQ inside like the IQ folder in the Google Docs. Is that actually okay? I made it my own.
Did you use my folder?
I used your folder, like going into the Google Drive and then going to like the IQ and then it was just blank. So I made a document and then just typed it in there.
Yeah, that's what you do. You'll drop the document into the IQ folder.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
And then you do the same thing with the quick write after we do those. But
Okay.
that's done at the end of class.
Okay.
Okay, Kalia.
Yeah, so this quick write that you're emailing us tonight, is that due next week?
Yes.
Okay.
But I'll give you plenty of time to do it. So what I'm asking is that the IQ and the quick write, you have it done before class at the next session. Because we're going to be using the quick writes for our happy hour. And we're going to be looking at the IQs during the course of the evening in our IQ karaoke. Okay? Michelle, do you have another question?
Yeah. So are we going to have another IQ homework to do next week?
No, I'm just going to give you the quick write to use.
Oh, okay then. Then just a quick write. Got it.
Yeah. And then we'll do an IQ the following week. Okay? All right. But there's a quick write every week. So I'm just kind of breaking you in gradually. so that you can focus on each one thing, and then we'll begin the two of them together. Okay. Okay. So again, it's a short article. It's just 2 pages, and it'll echo on some of the concerns that Vaca raised in this chapter. And then we'll do an IQ karaoke next week. Actually, the week after, when we do that first article. Okay. Okay. Again, the chapter was posted in Canvas, so hopefully you all got a chance to read it. The next article we do eventually will be from the reader, and then we'll go back into the textbook. Hopefully you'll have them all by then. Okay? All right. Questions? No? Yes, there's a question up here.
Sorry, I just wanted to go back a little bit when you were talking about the anticipation guide. You had on your slide that it was 18B, but when I went to page 18B, it was just a different page.
Yeah, because what happened was it got taken out of the book by mistake. So I will be revisiting that with you. So don't worry about that for now. It would come later in the class anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Don't worry about that for now. I just wanted to introduce you to what it looks like, so when we talk about it eventually, you can refer back to that diagram. Okay. Let's see. Tiana.
I think in the syllabus it said to have the quick writes and the IQs due before class, but to turn it in after class.
Right.
Do we have to turn it in after class, or can we turn it in when we finish it?
Well, you can turn it in earlier if you want to.
Okay.
Yeah, that's no problem. You just want to be able to access it when we're in class.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now let me mention one more thing that I found in my experience with these classes is that, remember in the syllabus it said that late work will get half credit. So it's important that you come prepared to class with the IQ and the quick write completed. And even if we don't get to the IQ that night, we may follow up with it the following week. So it's important to keep time management in place and get everything done on time. Early is fine. Just be sure you can take it out of your folder. This is why I say if you have a desktop folder with 521, then you can pull it out of that folder instead of having to go into your Google Doc and pull it out there. Okay? It's just more convenient because you want it in front of you when we're talking about some of the issues, and particularly with the IQ and the quick write too. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Professor?
Yes.
So it may be a silly question, but I can't access the Google Drive where to upload the assignments. I have my CSUN Google account, and when I click on Google Drive, I'm not really sure what it is I'm looking for.
Okay, is this Daniel Solomon?
Yeah.
Okay. After class, I'll try to send you another sharing email. And you should do it. But you're using a CSUN Google account, right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. For some reason, it should work. I don't know.
Thank you.
It's under shared files. Did you try that?
Yeah. So I'm literally looking at it right now. Shared with me.
All right. Then I'll send it again and let me know what happens. Okay.
Okay. Even after this, if you like, I could even share my screen and just to show you. But okay.
Okay, yeah, hang on a second. Let's see what happens.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so here's our final part of the broadcast tonight. I'm going to be sending you an IQ and the IQ form. You'll take some time to read through the article. You'll do the IQ, and then we'll have our first happy hour with that next week. If you have any questions about anything, you've got 4 other people or so that you can contact from your group that we met with tonight during that happy hour. So feel free to use that as a resource in case you have confusion. And if that doesn't work, then feel free to email me. Okay.
What if I already made like the IQ?
Then go ahead and put it in your folder.
Oh, okay, thank you.
You can drop it out next week, but I would still make a copy to put on my desktop in that 521 folder because it's easier. It may be easier to get into.
I won't be graded down, right? About that.
Pardon me?
I won't be graded down or anything like that, right? I won't get any penalties for it, right?
Being early?
Yeah, for doing it early. Okay.
Never. No, absolutely.
Okay.
No, you're never graded down for doing early.
Oh, yes. Okay.
All right, boys and girls, it's been a slice. This will end our broadcast for tonight. I'll hang out for a few minutes if anybody has any more questions. Other than that, try to stay cool. And I will see you all next Thursday, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, at 7 p.m. for our next third broadcast of secondary literacy. Take care, everybody. And again, I'll be around for a few minutes if anybody wants to hang out. Take care, everybody. Be safe.
Thank you. Bye.
Here.